Good evening, I'm Zaragonot, welcome to the studio. So, more sharp needles stuff. So, I'm going to try standing up tonight, at least for a little while, and maybe then we'll switch to sitting down, but here we go. Not quite sure how successful this is going to be. I've got to get back into the rhythm of doing this. I'm finding a good way to do it. So yeah, it's kind of... This isn't a particularly good way to do it. I don't really want to be doing blocks like that though. Well, at least now that I've committed to doing it this way, I'm going to have to just do it. JFDI, as they say. Excuse me, I've just had my evening meal, and for a little while I'll probably be wanting to clear my throat every so often. So here I am trying to actually even remember what day it is today. What day is it today? It's a Tuesday. Okay. I could not for the life of me remember whether it was a Monday or a Tuesday. Yeah, so it's been my second day back at work. And I couldn't have told you that a few moments ago. That looks a little bit. Let's do a little bit of a fill in there. So again, as often is the case, it was a little bit of a rush tonight to get here for the stream, but here I am. Now then. It's a little bit of a... Nothing to do with work, but it is a little bit of a... stress isn't the right word, but a little bit of a taxing, challenging week this week. And doing things like this is nice and relaxing, which is a good thing. It's kind of amazing, isn't it, how sometimes for hobbies people love doing something repetitive because it helps to calm their minds and relax them, and yet they would not want to work on an assembly line, for example, where you do the same thing time after time after time, repeating the same kind of Hang on a minute, didn't you just mention how relaxing doing the same thing was? And yet they don't want to work in the assembly line. Kind of. Human beings, they are somewhat contrary, aren't they? Implying that I'm maybe not human? Yeah, well, I am. Just seen on the national news here in the UK that tonight that somebody has won our national lottery with an £18 million win. Of course, it showed them holding the obligatory very large cheque for £18 million. And I was kind of thinking that would be really nice to have. Of course, you've got to enter the lottery to do it, and to have a chance of doing it. And not something I can afford to do at the moment. But I was kind of thinking just how much money, because I mean I'm working at the moment, just how much money would I like to win in order to sort of give up working, maybe to stream full time, something like that, just for fun. And I don't know, because these days if you sort of add it up, £1 million for example isn't as impressive sounding as it used to be. It isn't actually that much money these days. And it would have to, I was thinking it would have to be more than, now whether it is more I don't know, but it would have to be more than I earned in the next sort of 10 years, just because that's how much I earn in the next 10 years, and I'd need to still have that money. Hello Lolly, hello! I'm doing something really interesting again. You mean you don't like wood carving or pyrography or diamond painting or yeah, those things? you like well, I was about to say you like the bit where I am stabbing a piece of material with a really rather sharp needle. How are you anyway? I'm not seen you for a little while, which I guess is because you didn't like any of the aforementioned things. And I've just realised that bit's off camera now. That's going to be a bit of a problem, isn't it? As I work my way backwards and forwards across this piece of material. Oh, now you're being diplomatic. Yes, right. Well, this is something something new to the stream, I suppose. I mean, I have done the smaller pictures with this technique. This is just a larger needle and using double knitting wool to make a rug. I suppose what I should have done at that point there was just turn it over and just let you see what the other side looks like, because that's the front side. It's okay, I'm only teasing you a little bit. Carnival, okay. Pure fiction. Literally pure fiction. Essentially what's happening is this canvas. I'm sure you're familiar with canvas, but what's happening is the needle essentially forces its way through the small holes, like cross stitch, spreading out the warp and the weft, to give it its technical name, but spreading out the threads. And as the needle goes through it, he says, trying to emulate it. It pushes them apart, pushes a loop through, and then pulls back, and the threads tend to close up around it, and then as you do it again, I'm not very good at doing this with my finger, but as you do it again, it sort of pushes another loop through, and as you pull back, just the pure tension or the friction stops it pulling out like that. And then you end up with just lots of them. It is easy enough to pull out though. I mean, if I just yanked on this, I could pull the whole row out very easily. But once you start, they don't sort of fall out or anything. You can get hold of one of these, and if you pull enough, you will actually sort of pull out adjacent things, as we've had the odd cat do occasionally. But usually, it's like pulling a thread on a jumper sometimes, or something like that. It'll only go so far, so you don't end up with the whole thing coming apart. Yeah, the loop stays. But if you get seriously worried about it, what you can do, there's two things actually. One thing you can do is you can cut every single loop. That's quite a tedious thing to do, and when they do it, when this is done commercially on real rugs where they want to not have loops, what they actually do is shave the top with a knife going that way, which cuts off, and they obviously make the loops a bit longer to be able to do that. That one did pull back a bit. And that then, if you pull one thread out, it only pulls sort of one loop out. And then that way you don't get this cascade effect. The other thing you can do is you can get like a white fabric glue, a bit like PVA type glue, which you can obviously spread on the back, which will then bond the back of the wool to the canvas, which again helps. But essentially, never had one of these pull out. Of course, we don't tend to walk on them. They're more decorative rugs, so they're not in heavy traffic areas. And of course, with things like this, I've never ever had any loops pull out, and these are the sorts of things that people obviously touch, and you catch them with your nails and all sorts. I've occasionally got a little bit of a loop, but you really don't see it as a problem. Oh, thank you. My colour's off a little bit. My colour's off a lot. That's a dark blue, that's a light sky blue. I can hardly see that. The colour's off on that camera. Yeah, steam engine. That was done a while ago. It was done on stream as well. I got the other one. Yeah. I don't know where the other one is. I have another one. Another engine. Oh, the other one, yeah, it's a diesel engine, railway engine. But I just felt like, for once, doing something different again. I'm always doing something different, so this is same thing, but just done in large. Oh, that's good. I ought to get commission from some of these manufacturers, shouldn't I, for introducing people to new crafts. This particular needle came from a company in the UK called Punchcraft, but I have seen these sorts of things in 2 or 3 online craft shops. I mean, I know there's one in France which is called Pearls and Co. I forgot what they actually call these things. Rug needles for this large size. I haven't seen too many of the smaller sized ones, but and this is just, I think this is just normal canvas. And of course, I'm using rainbow wool here, but you can use any colour wool you like. This is going to have some triangular shapes in it, which will be solid colour. You can use sort of odd scraps of wool if you have them, or anything you like, really. It's I would say it's relatively cheap. Obviously it depends on the cost of the wool, but generally speaking you can pick wool up at a reasonable price, because it doesn't need to be anything particularly expensive. It's not like you're using alpaca or Angora wool or anything like that. That's a good question. That's a good question. This is the biggest rug I've done. I've only ever done sort of small ones. And I don't actually know. So we're actually gonna find out. In fact, I don't even know. Where's the? What's this one? 100 gram. Okay. So this is a 100 gram ball. And I'm probably going to get, what's that, probably about 9 inches out of 100 grams, because at this point here I start into the triangle, so I'm probably going to get to about here. So I know this is about 34 inches long. So it's kind of a guess. It's a bit difficult also to estimate, because it also depends on just how many loops you get in, how many stitches if you like, because if you pack the stitches really tight you'll use more wool than if you pack them less tightly. You do kind of need to get them tight enough, shall we say. I mean, I've got a couple of areas here where I'm a little bit loose, and it doesn't take much just to be able to see the canvas through them, whereas these sorts of areas here it's a little bit tighter, and just doing that you don't see the canvas. So it's getting that, it's like anything else, getting the right tension and the right technique, and I was just a little bit off just there for some reason. But if you sort of do it like I've done there, for example, it would probably go about, I don't know, 10% further, that sort of thing. But I am purely guessing. I've only sort of done small, what were you? Almost like cushion cover sizes. That sort of small, tiny rug size, and that took about, well, there'd have been something like 200 gram balls I had for that, so that would be in about one and a half balls, I think, off the top of my head. It's not, unfortunately, it's not exactly like cross stitch where you know exactly how many stitches you're going to do, and therefore you know exactly how much thread you're going to use. I haven't. To say one. What you really need with doing this is something which a frame to hold the material. And I've got some fairly large cross stitch frames, but I don't actually have one that's wide enough for this. but it helps it, which is why I've got a block of wood clamping it down to the desk. Because you don't need to hold it tight, but you do need to hold it tight enough, firmly, shall we say. It just helps. Just if you can see, you can see where where the holes are. You're not exactly going through the holes, but you can see where you're going to put the needle, and you can hold it tight enough so that the needle will actually penetrate through the material. So I'm not yanking this tight or anything. It is just sort of held firmly. But it would be a lot better if I could had something on this end to hold it, rather than me just trying to hold it here with my finger and thumb. Because if you do hold it reasonably sort of firmly, you can actually get quite quick in doing this. There are times when I kind of feel like a human sewing machine, because you're sort of doing about 2 or 3 stitches per second if you get really quite proficient at it. I guess if I was going to do a lot of these, I would probably actually make perhaps a proper wood frame, where I could either roll the 2 ends like I would do with a cross stitch frame, or probably a bit heavy to actually sort of frame it up like a painting canvas. Actually put an edge on it and try and sort of swing that around while you're trying to do this sort of thing. But don't know. It does tend to stretch a little bit as well, so that is another consideration. If you if you sort of permanently fasten it to a frame, by the time you've put a lot of wool into it, it's sagged a little bit. And if you're reading about this sort of thing online, one of the things it kind of suggests is using an embroidery hoop. Something like this, which I'm sure you're familiar with or you've seen before. The other thing I find about these is that it crushes the wool, and it takes it a long time to recover. If you've sort of crushed it between the bands, so I don't actually like using that on these. This is what I use when I do the pictures, but I make the pictures that size, so I'm not actually having to sort of move them because they crush as well. Ah, dear. The studio is a little warm tonight. But I'm going to say one of the nice things about this is it is quite a fast moving. You seem to make a lot of progress without getting very far. I mean, it's taken about 3 hours to do what I've done so far. I mean, with the size of the wool and the size of the needle, you sort of seem to get across a row or a particular area done fairly quickly. But with something like this, when you sort of work out that I think it's 27 inches by 34 inches, that'll be what's that going to be, about 60 centimetres by 95, something like that. There's actually quite a lot. It's actually quite a large area. So although you get through it fairly quickly, you don't make as much progress as it sounds like. It seems like I'm faster going left to right tonight than the other way. I was going to say it's a little odd, whether it is or not, I don't know. Needles seem to have a characteristic. I noticed this with the when I was doing the smaller pictures, because I have three needles that I can use for the smaller stuff. They're sort of identical to each other in terms of sort of size and capability, but there must be something just about the individual needle itself which I have a favourite for some reason. One always seems to work better or smoother with me than the other. And also certain things like the exact angle you hold the needle at, or the angle it's twisted at. This one, I'm kind of going through the material. Well, I'm going to say, I don't know if you've seen the end of one of these needles. Let me just pull it out. Just being careful. It looks like a hypodermic needle. So it's obviously it's a tube through which the thread goes, and then it's cut off at an angle, and there's a hole in the side, which is vitally important to where this thing works. So you have to make sure that wool does go through the side, otherwise it doesn't work at all. You just end up with lots of holes in your material. But where that slant is there, you can rotate it. as you know, the angle that you go through the material at, you can sort of, if you imagine you're going straight down, you can sort of go 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, or so on. And you always trail the wool behind you, but I find I have a particular preferred direction. It's about 2 o'clock for me, where it always seems to go through the material a lot smoother. Must be just my technique, but one of the things with this is, if you try it and find it difficult to go through the material, just try rotating the needle a little bit. You'll find a place where it just slips through quite nicely. And sometimes that differs for different material. Probably something to do with the hole size or the way the material's being woven, but now I'll just hold that in place while I just sort of sort. You need 3 hands sometimes. There we go. I don't have to be too accurate with this. It will level itself out again, but. When you first start doing this, it's a little bit challenging to maintain an even distance, but as you very quickly sort of get into the rhythm of just how far to move the needle and where to place it, and you start to speed up quite a bit. I'm doing this in long rows. Normally, I'd say you don't have to. You can sort of do this in any direction you like, diagonally, circular, whatever. But because I'm using this rainbow wool, if I don't do a particular, I suppose the difficulty is that if I dotted all over the place, you wouldn't get sort of colour bands or anything like that, or sort of how the things sort of come together. It would look odd, shall I say. So if I'm using a solid colour, you can sort of do small squares, triangles, circles, whatever you like, just to amuse yourself. But when you're using sort of wool, which is variegated like this, or multiple colours. Sometimes you end up having to sort of do it all in one direction in a regular sort of block, just to take advantage of the colours, otherwise it doesn't look right. What projects are you doing at the moment, Lally? I've seen you stream a couple of times, but I've been sort of otherwise engaged, shall we say, to be able to drop in. Will this desk come up a little bit? Yeah, well, that's better. I love my standing desk. Am I off screen? No, I'm still on screen. On screen. Okay, a screen. Tell you what, I can't speak properly tonight. One thing you do have to watch with this is that you don't let this bit of wool get tight. If it does, it doesn't create the loops. They pull out. And usually what happens is, if you don't notice it, you can do like half a row. Before you notice, you're not actually leaving any loops in the material, and you've got to then go back and do that area again. And you can only do that so many times because it does eventually damage the material to the point where the holes don't close up again, and then you're left with wool that you start again at that point. Of course, you can always pull the wool out and reuse it, so the wool isn't wasted. There's some funny bends in it, but that's not very difficult to sort of sort out. So I just generally pull a small pile off. I'm using when I'm doing the small pictures, I'm using thinner thread, and so they're on a reel and they sit on the pen itself, so they're generally free running. But this is relatively heavy, and it does actually get too. It won't drag the wool off of this ball. It will actually just stop, and then that's when you have the problem with the wool pulling out. So I create a big pile, or a pile like that. It doesn't actually matter too much how much you put out there. Generally speaking, I don't go for half a ball of wool just because it will get tangled. But and then having pulled the length out, what I do is I relay it, so I pull it backwards like this, because your thread to the pen is on the bottom, and it will drag the whole pile if you try and use it. So I just pull it back, which lays the thread that you're using on the top, and it doesn't pull as much. Sorry about the shadow. very occasionally you will just manage to get the needle in such a position that it sort of gets stuck on a thread, and you don't really, at that point you don't want to sort of ram it through, because you will pull threads and distort things and just generally make the canvas look a little unpleasant. If that happens, all you need to do is just wiggle the needle, rotate it left and right a little bit, and it'll generally slip past the thread that you've got the problem with. But if it doesn't, just take the needle out and put it in again, and that generally solves the problem. If you really want to make this kind of thing exciting for people who are watching, put your fingers underneath to support the material, and then start working really fast, because they then start of course expecting you, and you do end up doing it, jabbing yourself. Of course I don't recommend jabbing yourself, even for viewers, just because it really hurts. So although I'm not actually putting a lot of force on the needle, I am putting some force on the needle, and it's not something that you can stop very quickly once it starts moving through the material. And if it then decides it's going to come in contact with your hand, that's when headset users watching your stream don't like it quite so much. And of course, if you've had a stressful day or somebody's really annoyed you, you can do the imaginary, you can imagine that this is actually them that you're doing this to. And that can be quite therapeutic. Of course, I wouldn't recommend doing it in real life. Actually, in some ways, that's what tattooing is. Tattooing is driving a needle through somebody's skin, and in the process of that, you drag a little bit of ink with it, and it goes under the skin, under the surface of your skin, which is why it stays there permanently. But yes, if tattooing is jabbing a needle through somebody's skin, generally 50 or more times a second. So if you can't hold the material reasonably taut, you end up having to slow down just to be a little bit more careful about pulling the needle out, actually, more than pushing it in. So this is the back side of the piece. In some versions of this craft, that is the front side, that is the working side, or the visible side. In others it's the other side. I prefer that side myself. But I can see, you know, you can create a nice sort of pattern on the back here as well. So I can see arguments either way. In my glasses I thought to see a little bit better. So for anybody that's watching, this is making a rug. It's just a geometric pattern that's on the rug. It's a series of triangles just in the middle. This is kind of the background here that I'm doing. Right, on the way back we start leaving a bit of a space there for the first of the triangles, which I won't put in it immediately. I'll do quite a few rows of the background before I come back and start putting the first of the triangles in. When I've been doing some of the larger cross stitches or needle point tapestry type things. One of the things I've often sort of spent time doing. It's sort of amazing how your mind wanders onto all sorts of things whilst you're doing stuff like that. Sort of just sitting, whilst you sat down, just doing things like designing, like floor standing frames. To do something like this, for example, and what would it need? And you kind of want, I'm sort of thinking, you kind of want something like this at the back, which will hold the material, and that can roll up because this is just sort of plain material. It doesn't need anything. And you could almost do with something at the front, which would hold this firm out like that, firm enough so you can jab the needle through it, but not, well, yeah, firm enough so you can jab the needle through it. It doesn't need to be rock tight, doesn't this? You know, like you're stretching a canvas for a picture. I was just kind of thinking, but you only want a relatively small space to put the needle through, because the smaller the space, the better the tension you've got, and you could then just sort of rest your hand, if you like, on top here, and it would be enough tension on whatever's underneath for you to push the needle through, without necessarily having to roll this up or try and hold this tight, because if you roll it up tight enough to stretch things, you start to crush the wool on the other side. It's feels interesting to try and think of these, solutions to what is a problem. Like a solution to that problem, which is the fact that pulls through there fairly easily, would be to put some more paper underneath, because that's why that's there. It's just kitchen towel, but it was enough to clamp the material down. I'll have some tea. The other thing you want to think about if you were designing that sort of thing is, it really ought to be there. Because at the moment, with it sort of flat on the desk, which is essentially what this is, I'm having to look down on it actually. Alright, let me sit on this stool and then push the button to go down. I know I'm disappearing off, but I'm just kind of curious as to whether... It's a nice thing about a standing desk. Now that would need to be... I can't do this on stream, but I am just kind of thinking that what I could potentially do with this is just take it so that I can hold that vertically, and I can then push the needle in this way. And the reason about that is my head is now looking forward, and I can sort of look down without putting my head right down, because as you get older your neck starts to hurt when you start doing that. Mind you, it does when you're young as well, but it matters less then. It doesn't bother you as much, and that would be quite easy to do because you're holding the pen, your arms nice and relatively relaxed, and that might work quite well. I might try that after the stream, but for now I'm going to stand back up. Okay, should I pull that out a little bit? Yeah, it's getting a bit too close, so what I'm just going to do is reposition the material. It's amazing what clamps can come in useful for. Great big metal G-clamps, really good for sewing and tapestry work. Would have thought it. So I'll just pull that way a little bit. Get myself another. Excuse me, just disappear off camera. pick up a little bit of paper. That might be just enough to put a little bit of tension on the material. I'd actually use sort of big scissor type clamps to do this if I had any, but I don't. I've only got these which I use for woodworking. But if they do the job, that's what matters. Yeah, that one still isn't very tight. Let me just tighten that one up a bit more. Fold it in half. Okay, generally I leave the needle just in place. You can pull it out if you want. In between work, it's not. It's not really like you have to keep your place or anything like that. It's just by leaving it in, it just has less chance of pulling the wool out. So even going relatively slowly, as you can see, you kind of get a move on, even relatively slowly. It doesn't take very much to go across a few centimetres in a few seconds. You do this using things like embroidery cotton, or even real cotton, sewing type cottons. You use a smaller needle and you use potentially different material to this, but you can do all sorts of things like that. You can then create things like small badges or logos and things like that to go onto material, because with something like this, if this was cotton, for example, once you've created it, you can coat the back with fabric glue, which then locks everything in place, and that can also be used then to glue it to jeans or coat or whatever you like. So you can actually sort of create your own logos or patterns or favourite cartoon characters, whatever, on pieces of material, and then sort of transfer or glue them if you like, or sew them if you're that way inclined, onto garments or other things. Although, as I say, you would use smaller needles for that, or smaller diameter needles. They're just as long as this, but So the middle's not tight now. Yeah, that's typical. I could do with, I guess, to do this is something like a length of rubber, well, or something, piece of felt pad, a draft excluder. Oh, that's an idea. Draft excluder stuck underneath there. This paper that's on it is only because this is wood, and I didn't want it's rough wood, and that was an effort to sort of stop it catching on the material. But something like a draft excluder that will put even enough pressure on so that it doesn't pull through like that. It's probably that one at that end that's causing that. I folded that pad a bit thicker. My makeshift tools aren't working. Fortunately, this wood isn't quite long enough. Well, I suppose I could. What I was thinking of doing with it was if I actually roll the material around this, then it won't fall out, of course, or at least not at the early stages. But it's only as wide as the material, so I'll kind of be clamping them. I don't suppose that matters. Maybe that's something I'll try for the next stream. It helps if I tighten the clamp up the right way. Because I was thinking about which way I needed to turn the clamp, I got it wrong. Because when you tighten the clamp from the top, you turn it clockwise. When it's on the underneath, you still tighten it clockwise, but it looks like it's anti-clockwise from the top, and your brain gets in a muddle sometimes. Is that a bit tighter? A little bit tighter. So I tend to do these at literally about a needle width. The loops are about a needle width apart, and the rows are about a needle width apart. That seems to be roughly a good positioning. It seems to work quite well even for the smaller needles, doing it with the embroidery floss or cotton. But it does highly depend on just how tight you want the loops to be on the other side. If you want them tighter, you put the stitches closer together. If you want it looser, you put them slightly further apart. That probably matters more if you're actually going to sort of put the rug on the floor, where people might actually sort of walk over it or walk on it. Just because if they're a little bit tighter together, they support each other and they sort of stay upright and don't sort of crush down flat. If they're more sparse stitches, then they crush a lot easier. They don't support each other as well, they crush a lot easier. And it starts to look more untidy, unless that's the look that you're looking for. Sometimes, I mean, I'm sure you've maybe seen sort of rugs that have got really long threads, and they're often quite loose and shaggy looking. I mean, you could do this with, for example, like an Angora type wool, or I don't know whether it worked with double knitting wool or sort of a more fluffy wool. and it will look, completely different. It will look sort of more hairy, more sort of a furry type rug. With some wools, and I've never tried it with something like double knitting, but with some wools what you can do is get something, I'll say a wire brush. They're actually sort of, professionally they'd be called cards, wire cards, and they're often used for when you're working with raw wool, so the wool fibres before it's spun. You card the wool fibres, which gets them all to lie in a line. Fluffs them out, separates them up, and helps get debris out of the wool and all sorts of stuff before it gets spun. But you can also run one of those gently over the top of wool. It kind of breaks the wool fibres, fluffs them apart quite a bit. You'd have to use a small one. A big card would just catch and you'd never go anywhere. But you can then sort of really make these things really fluffy looking. So I've never tried it with this sort of wool. Have done something similar with embroidery floss, and that was of a picture of a cat, and it made the cat look like it had fur rather than wool. It's kind of a daunting experiment though when you try that for the first time. So you try it on a scrap bit of material, but when I did it on the cat, it was kind of like I just completed the whole cat, and even though I kind of knew what would happen, it was kind of daunting the first time you take that little, because it was like a toothbrush size. And you start effectively ripping the wool, and what's going to happen? Am I going to pull threads out? And you don't, but you're going to be gentle, but otherwise you possibly would. But you don't pull threads out, but you could sort of seriously sort of damage your piece if you weren't careful, I guess. And it's just that sort of nervousness. Until I suppose if you've done it once you've done it a few times, then you know exactly what's going to happen and what your technique should be and these sorts of things, then I'm sure it's less daunting. But there was certainly a lot of, am I doing this right? Should I really have started doing this? The end result was really nice, but and doing the original picture was really nice. I just didn't particularly enjoy the carding bit too much. One of the questions that I frequently get asked when doing things like this, which is now currently off camera, isn't it? There we go. And I've had it quite a bit with the small pictures that I was doing, is how many stitches are they? Or how many loops are they? And the answer is yeah, there's that many. I kind of have toyed with the idea once or twice of actually counting them, but there's no way I would remember, especially if I'm talking, just how many stitches I'd done even on that one line, never mind the whole thing. The nearest you get will be to go, that's a square inch, and therefore I've done that many in a square inch, but everybody always wants to know. And then it'd be just an estimate, because almost certainly no 2 square inches on this will have exactly the same number of things in. They're a bit tight on that side there. It's a little bit sculptured. You can't do it with this particular, well, I suppose you could find a way of doing it, but this particular needle is a fixed length. The needles that I've got for working with the embroidery floss, I can actually vary the length of the needle. And in doing so, what it does is it creates larger or smaller loops, depending on, the longer the needle, the larger the loops that you create, and therefore you can actually sort of sculpt the other side. And earlier on tonight, I was showing one I'd done previously with the smaller needles. And that has sculpted edges. The edges are rounded off, which gives a really nice sort of effect. But some of the others I've done, for example, of cats. What you can do with things like that is you can do things like the eye sockets. You can make, let's say, with smaller loops. Or as you come down the bridge of the nose, you can make the loops longer till you get to the tip of the nose with the longest loops. Or you come under the chin. As you come under the chin, you make the loops smaller, so you get an edge. So you can actually sculpt the pattern on the other side, and that adds an extra dimension to what you're doing. So it can get, you can get some really kind of nice effects just from the length of the loop. Now this needle isn't variable length, but I guess if I really wanted to, I suppose one of the things I could do is just put something over the needle, because it stops when you push it in. It stops at the black edge. But if I put something over the edge of the needle, like a rubber band, for example, so I shorten the needle, I could actually create shorter loops if I really wanted to. Can't make it longer, but so even on a rug you could do some wool sculpting. That's the point of. I keep wanting to call them stars, but they're not the triangles. And what I want to do is leave a gap. Now, what I'm going to do in this particular case is just pull out some of the thread. The idea was hold the loop on the other side and just leave a gap, just a small gap. I'm going to leave this loop on this side. I'll cut it off later. But just for now, I'm just going to leave the loop there, just as a kind of a reminder. As I get further up that triangle, what I'll start doing is actually cutting the wool and restarting, which is easy enough to do. Now if I was working with a single colour of wool here rather than the sort of the rainbow coloured wool, what I do is just go backwards, go back and just do that area, and then come back and do this area here. But because I'm working with this multicoloured wool, if I did that it wouldn't look right, because the wool fades from one colour to another. So if I sort of started going backwards and forwards on there and then started here again with sort of bright orange wool, you don't see the fade, and it would kind of might look odd. But having said which, because we've got a triangle in the middle, it might be okay. Don't actually know. I don't want to try it and find out, so I'm doing it my way. I was just thinking then that I don't know about a rug, but the smaller picture stuff is quite good for travelling, because if you like doing these sorts of things while you're travelling, just because you've got a smallish embroidery hoop, the cottons don't necessarily take up very much room, and the needle itself isn't much of a problem. And you can sort of potentially, it's a nice thing, I suppose, to sit on the beach. I mean, I used to work in sales. I used to travel all over the country, and I used to take one with me, so I've got something to do on an evening. It's incredibly boring being in a hotel by yourself, especially when it's sort of the it's almost every week of the year. But there again, the thought just crossed my mind that these days they probably wouldn't let you take one of these things on a plane, for example. It would have to be in your cold luggage. Right, let's pull some more thread out. one of the things I hate about knitting is when you get the ball of wool, it gets to this sort of stage and it starts to collapse, and it sort of just degenerates into sort of a great big fluffy rag mess of wool, and it always annoys me. I like these things to be neat even when I'm sort of knitting, and of course if you're not very careful then it sort of just turns into a great big knot, especially if you happen to have cats around. So where you can get for knitting, it wouldn't work for this, but you can get bowls, wooden or plastic bowls that if you like a vase but with a fairly wide base, sort of a bulbous sort of vase, I guess. You can drop your ball of wool into it, and of course the wool comes out through the top, and well, sometimes they have like I was going to say like a hole in the side, but generally they have a, instead of it being a solid hole, there's a channel down. You put your wool into that, and of course the ball of wool then stays in the pot. It unravels, it doesn't tend to roll all over the floor, and if you have a cat, the cat doesn't start throwing the ball of wool around the place. Quite a nice neat little thing. Offs. I have to remember that this camera doesn't unfortunately show both ends. Nobody bothered telling me, did they, that I was off camera? Once again, I'll just hold the loop on the other side and then grasp it on this side so I can pull out a section of wool. Hold it, and then effectively I'm just starting again. That's exactly how you start from a freshly, from a new piece of wool. Just leaving the gap for the point of the triangle. Right, adjust the camera. There we go. This time I remembered. There we go. Well, that's what we've done tonight. So essentially, the horizontal bit here is what's been done tonight in the stream so far. So even with sort of just rainbow coloured wool, you can create different effects just by how you lay out the pattern, the rows, the angles, whatever you want. I could have gone diagonally. Doesn't make any difference. In this case, because the wool is coloured or variably coloured, you can see that I've gone horizontally here and vertically this way, or whichever way you want to look at it. Or if I'd gone diagonally, you'd see it. And I suppose you could do if you wanted to, you could do things like a patchwork effect using variegated wool like this. You know, you could do a square one way, you could do a square going in square circles, back and forth. You know, you can sort of do what you like in that respect, and I guess then that becomes something which is variable length as well. You do as much as you like, which could prove interesting. You can make cushion covers like this, by the way, as well. I mean, this stuff, it's just canvas, so you know, sew this to a cushion cover. I suppose you could turn it into a cushion cover, just depending on how you want it to use the material. But I guess it would be better done if it had a backing on it. And so, you know, you can have a nice geometric pattern, get some wool that matches your colour scheme. You can do all sorts of things. It's easy enough as well, as you'll see when I get to doing the triangles. To change wool colour, you can write on these things. You can actually put a picture on relatively easy. Remembering, of course, that you can't get really detailed. You only have something like about 12 pixels per inch, not the what would it be, 144 or more that you get on the screen, or the 600 plus you get on a printout. This is somewhat more coarse. This is kind of more posters, pictures, but you can put initials on here, for example, if you wanted, quite easily. Single lines as a pattern don't work so very well, just because as you look here, I mean the orange, for example, is a single line, but you can see how it's not particularly straight. It's sort of some loops have gone to one side, some have gone to the other, so you probably do about, well, a small band if you wanted lettering, for example. So you can put somebody's name on there, nice big heart, for example, or whatever, and relatively easily. So it's a fun sort of thing, and you can come up with some nice stuff. he says, thinking about what he just said and cushion covers. That's an idea. That's the end of April. Sorry. An idea for a present just came to mind. But whether I'll have time to do it or not, I don't know. We shall see. Unfortunately, though, it's 9:15 UK time now. I'm going to stop at this point. I'd normally go until 9 o'clock. Probably do another couple of hours. But I am getting a headache, which feels like it might become a migraine headache, and I don't want it to be that. So what I'm going to do is go and do something else, because the bending over is causing my neck muscles to get a bit tight, and I know that's a trigger for me for migraine, so I want to avoid that. So I'm going to go relax them and do something else. But thank you very much for watching. If you have been, I suppose if you haven't been, it's always funny. I hear that on another somewhere else. Thank you for watching. If you have been, thank you for watching, and it always amuses me. And I'm not unconsciously, I'm saying the same thing. I will be hopefully on stream again tomorrow evening, where we will continue doing this rug. We've got a fair length to go, but we've done a fair bit. There's 3, 4, about 4.5 to 5 hours of work there in that. So as you can see, this rug is about 34 inches long. That's about 4 inches long. So there's a fair number of hours to go, but that's all the fun of doing it. So if you would like to see more on tomorrow night's stream, that's going to start from approximately 7 PM UK time, that's GMT at the moment, or as soon after then as I am able to do so. The time varies slightly because when I get home from work, I have to make an evening meal and have something to eat before I start the stream. Otherwise, maybe the stream wouldn't go on quite as long, just because I'd be hungry and wanting to go have something to eat. So as soon as I can after 7 PM UK time. If you'd like to see any of the earlier streams, a few of them are available here on Twitch under past broadcasts, but you can also catch any of the earlier ones all the way back to almost the first one on YouTube. Zaragonart on YouTube, so youtube.com/Zaragonart. If you want notification of when I'm live, you can of course do that here on Twitch with the button that's up there. And also, perhaps a better one is to follow me on Twitter. It's at Zaragonart, twitter.com/Zaragonart, because I will not only do a tweet when I go live, but I also tend to tweet if I can't go live for any reason. Usually because I'm out, and I can then very easily send a tweet. Not so easy to put a message here on Twitch, so look out on Twitter if you ever wonder, am I going to stream? That's where you'll find out. And I think that will do it for this evening. I wish you all a very good evening. Hope I'll see you on the next stream. For now.
Nobody knows one thing they speak. My mind for I sprung a big face down in the bar. Scared to death. Creatures of the league looked at me and then wept. Dark eyes with the soulful tears for all my fears. Respect for the little precious time you have here. Let go, float, reclaim my life. From misstep, just shipwreck all in one eye. What's the cure for that? Still trying to find a way to keep buzzing. What's the cure for that? Past life, path, but domino mistake. The beat keeps calling me back, there's no escape. So what's the cure for that? Nothing. There's too many toys for me to stop crushing. Be rescue remedy? What's the cure for that? Still trying to find a way to keep buzzing. What's the cure for that?